Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm hiring. So we'll start with a quick session from Kiran Prasad. Kiran Prasad comes from LinkedIn. He's Director of Engineering at LinkedIn. Kiran? All yours.
So, since everybody came up here and started with the I'm hiring pitch, I guess that's how I have to start. Is that how it works?
Yeah. You got the mic, don't people hire. You got the mic.
Can it magically work? There it goes. Good? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you told me I have 10 minutes, so we're going to go fast. Can I ask a couple of questions just to kind of get an idea about the audience and stuff? So, how many of you have, how many of you are developers? So almost everybody's developers? Oh, good. Awesome. How many of you have done mobile development? What's that? Okay. How many of you mostly do front-end UI development? Okay. And how many of you have done back-end stuff at all? Good amount of savers. Okay. So they asked me to talk about client-side rendering. So before I kind of went into that, I wanted to give you a little idea on why I'm pro client-side rendering for specific cases. So this sort of gives you a little bit of background about how LinkedIn Mobile's stack currently is built and why we chose to build it that way. To give you a little bit of a history about myself, so you kind of have a better idea of where my background comes from. So obviously our background sort of influenced our choices. My background is that before I was at LinkedIn, I used to lead the WebOS project at Palm. So done a ton of, when you're building a device, everything's client-side by definition. So it was all client-side rendered for all of our applications. So I know it can be performant and you can build lots and lots of different types of applications. But when you choose to do it is an important thing. So let me get into it really quick. So this is a definition that I've been sort of using, and it sort of will help you understand why we picked the choices. So websites, by my definition, focus on content, generally long-form layout. So you can think about like blogs. You can think about where you're really sort of like trying to consume lots of articles. Maybe like CNN.com, like places where you're not really trying to get things done, or workflow where you're trying to move through an application. Applications are much more focused on flow and actions, lists, and details. So Gmail's an application. We actually think LinkedIn's an application. Facebook's an application. These are places where you're trying to get something done. You're going through a set of actions. It's not just sort of consuming long-form content. And so a huge amount of mobile is around building applications, mostly. And so that has an implication of sort of why client-side rendering is so important. Some more quick background. Just going to kind of quickly go through this. So classic Model V controller, look at where the client-server border is. As you scale up, you add more processes. You go to tiered systems. You guys have done this, I'm sure, at eBay and PayPal in mass ways. But all of this is sort of the controllers and templating on the server side. Eventually, people are saying, well, with HTML5, we can move the controllers and templating to the client side. This is where the client-side rendering would happen. And then maybe we have something that sort of helps us communicate with the back end. They talked about Node.js here, using something that does something like this. So it's important to understand that, while this is all great and is an interesting thing to sort of debate on the HTML5 side, this is a necessity whenever you're doing client-side native development. There is no server-side rendering for native. You can try to do it, and I'll talk a little bit about how we've tried to do it. But in general, if you're going to do native development, your templates are effectively code on the client side. And so you have to build your system to support client-side rendering if you're going to do native development. So let's talk about what does the client-server sort of line-level format look like. And we actually use templates as our line level format. So we don't really look at it as sort of server-side templating or client-side templating, but the actual line level format that you're communicating with is templates. This is actually really powerful for a couple reasons, and how we use them is sort of interesting. We don't put in our templates things like links, styles, positioning. So from that standpoint, we have templates on the client side that really do a lot of the rendering. This way, if we want to use a native renderer, like iOS renderer or Android as a, using the Java renderer, we still get all of the native looks and feels of the client-side application. We do like it to have templates on the server side. We build up these templates and sort of fill them in on the server side so that we don't have to go through the entire App Store approval process every time we want to add a new item into our stream, or every time we want to sort of add a new field into our profile, from LinkedIn's point of view. So the line level format are templates. You can kind of see here we do the t-type nut1 and the timestamp and stuff like that. Another big aspect of our definition of applications is page versus screen. So our app right now, our mobile app at least, is multiple screens inside a single page, which means it's just divs that are being hidden and shown with sort of CSS animations to transition between them. And we use Backbone to do all of our MVC stuff on the client side, and we use underscore for our micro templating. So really, like I told you, because we have some of our templating being done by the node side on the server side, and some of our templating being done on the client side, we use underscore. And it's the simple micro templating function. I mean, underscore has a .template function, so it's not advanced templating like Dust or some of these other things that provide that. And we use closure during the process of building the app to actually compile the template into functions and use them. Now, the natural question I get is, well, doesn't that make downloading the app really big, and how do you solve that problem? I'm going to skip through this since we're focused on the templating stuff. But in general, we sort of download in pieces. So why client-side? Why client-side templating? Well, now that you kind of understand some of these definitions, one of the big reasons is if you build with the concept of client-side rendering built into your web application or web architecture, it means it gives you the opportunity to choose other rendering technologies that are not just web-based to render. So like native iOS or native Android. And sometimes you need to do that in order to get the performance you want for a speedy interaction, especially on mobile devices. The second big reason that I believe sort of client-side rendering is super duper important is because of performance when you're moving from screen to screen, especially in a mobile platform. So if I tap on a list item and I want to go to the next screen, I don't want to have to do a server round trip in order for that screen to render. And in a single page model where your screens are just divs, I don't need to go to the server to render that next screen. In fact, I might have retrieved it on the first screen. And so to really get the level of performance that I think people expect out of applications versus websites, where I'm going to not just do sort of tap and then scroll and read a lot of stuff, but like tap, do something, go back, tap, do something, go back, where you're constantly touching the screen or interacting with it. Performance is super critical. And so client-side rendering, I believe, actually provides a better or more performant way for the user to be able to build and interact with applications. Just a point of view.
Thanks, Kiran. That was great. I would like to invite Subbu from Yahoo. He leads front-end engineering. All right.
And I suppose Yahoo's not hiring, right?
I didn't want to make a spiel on that. I'll leave it if you want to right here to do that.
But I think Marissa has to look at the resume.
I'm glad you clarified that. So when I walked in, I kind of got in late, and as soon as I walked in, the session started, and I kind of felt important. The session is waiting for me, but then I realized I was to follow Bill Scott, and I immediately was humbled back down. So, yeah, so I remember attending one of his first talks when I joined Yahoo, and I still remember that talk, so thank you. So hello, good evening to everyone. So before I start, I do have one word of caution. Like the all cliche Indian names are long, I don't want to disappoint. My name is pretty long as well. So for people who can't read that out, I have good news. I actually go by Subram, as he said, Subbu, and my Twitter handle is RMS Gohan. So one of the reasons I want, when Resental reached me out saying I need to do a talk on templating, and we were going back and forth, and one of the things I was discussing with one of my friends, in a completely different discussion, we were talking about how all these crime serials that you see, every time you see an image like that, it's always the same. Irrespective of what the scene is, the pose of the man that they draw out is always that. So the reason I put this up is because when he wanted to describe the situation to me, he didn't know what to call that. And he kept saying, you know that drawing. And I kept saying, what? And finally he said, the murder template. So which is why I thought it's kind of niche to put that out there and saying that some kind of template processing is what we want to talk about. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know what I should be saying in the first 10 minutes of the talk, considering we're already going to have some kind of debate. So I'll talk a little bit about what I did and what I was doing at Yahoo and how I started with this whole notion of templating. And over the years, how I saw that go from what I was doing initially, when I joined Yahoo 7 years ago, to what it is today in my current project. So I started with something like that, and this was my first introduction to templating as far as I'm concerned. We had some kind of data variable that you want to pick up from some kind of function. You wanted that to get substituted into some kind of markup. What it told me is any kind of templating is you have some logic that you want to run and determine the data that you want to set in a given placeholder, and the placeholder part is what a series of placeholders is what you have when you call as a template. All that changed when, to me at least, all that changed when Mustache was kind of thrown open, where everyone said there's this cool new standard. When I heard Mustache, I had all these notions in my mind where it is something magical, but when I looked at it, I realized quickly that it's just another way to do exactly that. So when Mustache was thrown in, what it did was it didn't radically change much, but it still is the same set of items. You still have some kind of logic to determine what data you need to bind to a given placeholder. With a slight difference being now how good these renderers are and how good these Mustache engines are, you now have the ability to just dump a whole data object to a Mustache renderer and it gives you HTML immediately. You have a very minimalistic amount of conditionals you can do as to whether you have some key value available in the object or not that allows you to determine a very basic level of conditional in the Mustache template itself. I work in Mail, in Yahoo Mail. I do hope a lot of you, if not for hiring, I will say more of you should start using Yahoo Mail. They're doing some really cool stuff in there. So that's my hiring pitch, get more users to Yahoo Mail. So in Yahoo Mail, what we did was, with Mustache templates, it was slightly different with what we approached it in. The way we dealt with, as everyone said, it's a debate today, so I don't know how strong of a stand I should take, but we kind of focused on two things between having what the Mustache can help us do. One is we want the Mustache template to be available both on client and server. So we maintain a single set of Mustache templates. We now build, during a build step, we now generate its counterpart PHP equivalents and server equivalents of the given Mustache file. So now a same template, which is now available to be used on the server-side language, it could, we are using PHP, but it could be any other language of your choice. It's a simple hash map representation of the given string Mustache template that you have into either a YUI JavaScript usable object or a PHP usable object. The reason we do that is to share kind of the burden between client and server. You still want the server to generate your top level page on which so that now the moment you get the request to the server, you have something immediately you can flush down to the client with some some things you can actually interact on. Whereas while that is happening and then the server is doing some processing, we can kind of do bring in templates on the client and start working on them. So roughly, if you look at the architecture, it kind of is, the moment our request hits one of our web services, we flush down the page skeleton, which is immediately a server-side rendering of basic mail data with your mail lists, with mail contacts and all of that. And as soon as that is flushed, there is also a parallel system which is going and now pulling in additional data that needs to get flushed into the client so that the client now can do a lot more and start building on these pages. So doing that, just to throw out in some numbers, we are able to bring down that kind of template plus data under 25 milliseconds on the server so that the moment someone requests the page, the first thing you see within no time is a page which is fully rendered mail application with all the CSS and everything, and it is immediately actionable. So the goal why we need to do this kind of split with the parallel processing system is our overall goal was to have this mail launch under 350 milliseconds so that the user can, as soon as the user says mail.yahoo.com, assuming he or she is signed in, is they're going to see the mail come in. So to get that kind of experience, we really can't wait for the templates to flush down to the client and do a whole bunch of processing on the client and start rendering the page. So I'll reserve some of my other comments for server-side and the client-side debate. So just to quote one of my new favorite villains from the movie, let the games begin.